Thank you. The question of how best to expand insurance coverage and lower health care and particularly prescription drug costs has been a major issue dividing the candidates on the Democratic presidential debate stage. In your view, what role should the government play in providing health insurance to Americans? Should the U.S. move to a single-payer system in which private health insurance is largely or entirely eliminated? Should people be given the option to buy into Medicare? Is there an alternative approach you would prefer? And then short of a major overhaul of the U.S. healthcare system, are there any other legislative measures that you believe could improve the functioning and cost efficiencies of the system? And we'll start with Kim Moulton.
Well, if you've heard me speak before, you know that I have a belief that this country is rich enough, she is sophisticated enough that to provide health care for all of her citizens, affordable, quality health care for all of our citizens. The devil's in the details and how you get there. But here's something we've recommended and talked to, especially when I'm on the phone with providers who provide the health care for us. We believe that a lot can be accomplished if you would lower the age for when people can come into Medicare. If you bring folks in at 55, you have a younger, you have a more healthy population, and it allows for more competition within that government structure. That's the first thing that you could do, because people will be a whole lot more expensive at 65 if you don't do preventive care at 55. That's number one. Number two is, if you could stomach the presidential address at Congress where he talked about, get a bill on my desk and I will sign it, and the House stood up and said, how about HB 3? We have a bill sitting there to lower the cost of pharmaceuticals, to lower drug prices and allow for competitiveness among that sector. I used the VA facility as a combat vet, and that facility, which is government run, allows for competition within the pharmaceutical prices. We need to do that. And the final thing is, I believe when I talk to medical folks that they ought to have nutrition as a mandatory course within their medical schools, because if you know anything about food, food can be a deterrent for your health, and it can be something that cures you. And I think all doctors ought to be in the preventive arena. Thank you.
Sam Vega.
I think the answer is that healthcare is a human right, and we need to start treating it as such. So the issue with taking the slow lane to Medicare for all is that in the meantime, people are losing their homes. People are rationing their insulin, and people are dying. So we need to make the fight for the thing that will protect us all, that will help the most vulnerable of us. And that's the fight to get to Medicare for all. It needs to be a priority set by the Democratic Party, but I think even Republicans will get on board. And I say that because everyone worries about their health. Everyone wants to be healthy. Everyone worries about their health insurance. And if we take that worry away from them, just imagine that. And imagine what it would be like for you. In addition to Medicare for all, and I think this all needs to work together, you would want to do things like making sure we cap how much you spend yearly on prescriptions. I think there are good plans out there for that. I know, what's it called? Prescription Drug Price Relief Act would also help in just doing that kind of thing. So, yeah, that's.
John Began.
Yeah, so the ultimate goal is we must get to universal health care. No one should go bankrupt or die in this country because they couldn't afford the health care. That's it. So that's the goal. Now, as far as the system, there's a lot to that system. Insurance is just one small piece of it. As the only person on this stage who has a healthcare background, I worked as a senior analyst for the largest Medicare Advantage provider in the country, so I'm fairly familiar with the ins and outs of this. So when it comes to, is it Medicare for all, is it Medicare for America, is it expanding the ACA? That is most likely going to be decided by whoever we put at the top of the ticket. And I will vote for any or all of those things because all of them are better than the current system. So that's where I'm at on that. But we also have to bring down the cost of education. When you have docs that are coming out with $300,000 and $400,000 worth of medical debt, They can't go into general practice. They can't move to rural areas. This is something that we've got to do. We also need to clean up our air because DFW is the 17th most polluted city in the United States. What does that do? That increases asthma rates. What happens to healthcare costs when asthma rates go up? Your healthcare costs go up. And on the prescription drug piece, I do agree with Kim about HR 3. I also think that we need to go beyond that and allow people to purchase across international borders. That would allow some competition and bring down costs, and it's something that has been supported by both Democrats and Republicans.
Richard Fleming.
Back in 2016, I had a cousin of mine that passed away of AIDS in a small town in Texas. I watched him, a good-looking 35-year-old man, just change into something that was almost unrecognizable. After he got HIV and then full-blown AIDS, he tried to get the care that he needed, but couldn't get it. Got shuffled between systems in a small town in Texas, on a border town. You know, at first there was his medicines, then it was his tests that he had to have on a monthly basis. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in one of the wealthiest countries in the world, and the state of Texas is probably one of the wealthiest states in the union. Each year, state of Texas gives the Texas corporations $18 billion in tax credits and incentives in order to do business in this state. We could take $3 to $4 billion and help our folks with health care. That shouldn't happen. But what we need to do, we need to make it more competitive. We need to make sure that this affordable care was something was a basis for us to get started, right? And so we need to stick with it. We need to expand it. We need to make sure that the Congress folks in Congress, they have to make this a priority. There's no reason in the world why folks should be walking around without health care. This has to be a priority. Every governmental legislature, they all get together and figure out what they want to pass, what they want to work on. It has to be a priority. And once it's a priority, then they need to go into committee and make it happen, make it work.
Candice Valenzuela.
When I graduated from college, I got a job. And then I got another job. And then I got another job, all at the same time. I got into a car accident my senior year of high school, and I'd injured my back. And that meant that I needed pricey physical therapy, and I needed medication. And if I didn't get those things, I wouldn't be able to function to do one of those jobs, much less all three. And so that was the way I was able to pay for things, and it didn't leave room for much else. I wasn't able to save for anything. Quite frankly, I even as I worked very hard, as the jobs came back after the recession, lots of those jobs didn't come back with the insurance benefits that generations before previously had. Prescription drugs and insurance have become so costly that I can't even say that it's just afflicting the poor anymore. It's afflicting the middle class, and quite frankly, it's afflicting most of the wealthy. I think that the solution in this country is that we should have an affordable public option. People should still be able to stick with their health care if they happen to like it, especially the union folks who've negotiated great health care. But there's no reason that we shouldn't be able to have insurance cover everyone in this country. And barring that, we need to be able to negotiate prescription drug prices. HR 3 only allowed for 25. It's ridiculous. It should be at least 250.
Jan McDowell.
Yes, health care is a human right. Everyone needs to have accessible, affordable health care. I think we're all in agreement on that. So it becomes just a question of how we're going to get from here to there. I believe that currently in our government, everything is in chaos. Chaos in healthcare is the absolute worst thing. That's a matter of life and death. So I think that if it requires taking intermediate steps to move toward the goal of universal health care, which is probably Medicare for all, then I'm all for anything that moves us along that pathway. I actually worked for 12 years as the controller for a group of orthopedic surgeons. So I have seen firsthand the cost systems, how things are coded and paid for by varying insurance companies that are set up with contracts with providers, and it all becomes just a tremendously confusing mess that doesn't have much to do with providing care for people's health. If people can have preventive health care for their entire lifespan, we end up with much better outcomes across the board. It's things that are diagnosed early, people are on a healthy path, prescription drug prices need to be part of that mix, affordable drugs. So it's kind of an all of the above to get us to good outcomes at lower costs than where we currently are.